The previous Mishnah taught that the 5 species of grain are subject to both Challah and Maasros obligations. This Mishnah lists cases where produce of the 5 species have a Challah obligation, but do not have a Maaser obligation. We now turn to the words of the Mishnah. The following are subject to Challah but exempt from Maasros: the gifts to the poor of Leket Shchicha Pe'ah and ownerless grain. These are exempt from Maaser because the Maaser obligation applies only to produce that has an owner and that a Levi has no right to take. Since these gifts may be taken by a Levi, they are not subject to the Maaser obligation. Nevertheless, they are subject to the Challah obligation. Also subject to Challah but exempt from Maaser is Maaser Rishon, whose Truma, i.e. Trumas Maaser, was taken, but Truma Gedola was not separated by the owner. That is, the Levi separated Trumas Maaser from the Maaser Rishon. This is speaking of when Maaser Rishon was separated before the grain became obligated in Truma Gedola. Maaser Sheni and Hektish that were redeemed are also subject to Challah but exempt from Maaser. Maaser Sheni that was redeemed is speaking of a case where it was separated before the grain was obligated in Maasros. Hektish that was redeemed is exempt because it did not belong to the owner when the Maaser obligation took effect. Also subject to Challah but exempt from Maaser are the leftovers of the Omer offering. Also subject to Challah but exempt from Maaser is grain that did not grow a third of its full growth. Only grain that has grown enough that it will grow if replanted is obligated in Maasros. Since grain that has grown less than a third will not grow if replanted, it is exempt from Maasros. However, with regard to Challah, this exemption does not apply. The next Tana disagrees with regard to grain that grew less than a third. Rabbi Eliezer says grain that did not grow a third is exempt from Challah. Rabbi Eliezer learns from a verse that the laws of Challah are compared to the laws of Truma. Thus, just as grain that did not grow a third is exempt from Truma, it is also exempt from Challah.